Strap in and lock in because you don't want to be scrambling 3 weeks from the bar exam, begging people for tips and study schedules that began like 12 weeks ago, so it doesn't even apply to you anyway. I know it feels far away, but you know the bar exam is coming. If you want to finish strong, you need to start strong. If you want to relax with cookies and milk, Whole Foods is that way. You know, I try to be nice and understanding and tell people, hey, there's plenty of time. It's all right. Until they keep doing the same thing for weeks on end and there's really isn't time anymore. So I need to nip this in the bud today and do what I secretly enjoy the most, turning into bad cop and letting out my karmic frustration on people who took my leniency for granted. All right, so let's talk about how to get this shit done. If you're preparing for the bar exam, you are probably overwhelmed by a mountain of advice, recommendations, courses, lectures, outlines, all these options, tutors, and just a whole lot of anxiety. It's not because it's a lot of work. You're willing to do the work. It's because you care about this. It's high stakes, but there's just too much uncertainty. Like, how do you know what's actually going to work? First of all, everyone's advice is autobiography. That means advice is from their perspective, not yours. But I've spoken with hundreds and thousands of bar takers, so hopefully I can give you a more realistic view of what you want to do to be well prepared. Barbary and Themis are fine materials and whatnot. Maybe even Kaplan is okay. Maybe. They tell you what to study, but for some reason they don't teach you how to study. So we're going to play by a different set of rules here. One where you're not playing defense, scared about all the law you need to know. That constant grinding feeling of being completely stuck and in limbo and maybe even falling behind and not even sure you're making any progress. No, we're going to play offense. We're going to lean into it and take proactive charge. It's going to be working smarter and not just grinding harder. Let me know if this sounds familiar. You're putting in the hours, you're watching all the lectures like a good boy or a good girl, you're filling in all, the completion meter and checking off all the boxes on your Themis dashboard. Feels nice. But that feeling of making real tangible progress is just not there. You feel busy, you feel safe, but comfort doesn't mean you're making any meaningful progress. In fact, you're exhausted, even though, or because, all you're doing is consuming the information. It's like you're eating and eating and eating at an all-you-can-eat buffet without digesting any of it. And that's going to end up, and you're actually not getting better at taking the exam. This is exactly why bar preppers get stuck every year. There's this angel, or devil for a lot of you, whispering in your ear, you're not doing enough. You just need to buckle down and do more. But guess what? If you're singing out of tune, singing louder just makes it worse. In the end, most of them throwing these bloated bar review courses back where they came from and end up finally changing their way in the last few weeks. And this is a cycle that happens every year. It's a switch people typically make after experiencing for themselves how ineffective these cookie cutter programs are. So, what's the core problem here? Don't get me wrong, the courses are nice, they're polished, it's got good raw materials. They teach you what to study, not really how to learn, how to retain the information, how to put it all together and gain not just information, but insights on how to actually answer the questions correctly. It all boils down to a fundamental misunderstanding, a confusion between studying and learning. They are not the same thing. There's a huge difference between knowing a rule and knowing how to use a rule. I mean, just give it a try. Pull up an essay, pull up a blank sheet of paper or blank document, and see how that goes. So on one side, you've got passive studying. This is just consuming information, watching, reading. It feels productive, right? It doesn't take too much energy, but it's, really it's how you get burned out and how you get cold sweats from not being able to solve the questions despite all that time you spent on it. You're going to forget 99% of the information you hear and read, and you're not exactly going to be confident in answering the questions. Now, active learning, that's about doing, it's about producing, it's testing yourself, getting questions wrong, and then figuring out why you got them wrong. As humans, I think we're wired to not just, consume and, take what other people are saying. I think we're wired to be creative and to produce. You're making the mental effort to understand the concepts. It feels hard in the beginning, but it's actually less exhausting over time than just staring at outlines and listening to videos over again. It's like working out a muscle and staying on a decent diet. You struggle at first, but it's how the growth happens as you keep at it. It's not an overnight miracle, otherwise, we would all have six packs. But when you see actual progress little by little, that's the most motivating thing you can do for yourself. A lot of you are just looking for motivation from other people, like just staring at the clouds. It's not going to happen. Bar exam is a performance you're getting on stage. It doesn't care how many lectures you sat through. It only measures one thing. Can you identify the issue and apply the law correctly to a set of facts under pressure? That's it. Your entire prep needs to be built around that one simple reality. So one solution is to fully embrace active learning. Seems like a generally good idea, but it's about making an internal shift, right? It's not always easy to escape old patterns of hiding behind books and sitting through your professor's lectures like you did in law school. To make a shift from being a passive student, just soaking things in, save that for the beach, to being an active participant in your own education and learning. It's the difference between being somewhat vaguely familiar with a rule because you've heard it once before and actually knowing how to use that rule. Clarity and real understanding, that only comes from reflecting on the work that you did. So maybe you got 40% on your MBE set. Great, that's valuable data. Set aside your ego and actually look more at the things you got wrong and figure out why, so that next time it becomes 45%, then 50, 60, 70, and beyond maybe. But to really embrace active learning, we have to talk about the biggest obstacle first, and that is our own paralyzing fear of getting things wrong. It kind of sounds backward, doesn't it? Our whole lives we're trained to avoid making mistakes. We're all susceptible to it, but what if embracing your mistakes was actually the single most powerful thing you could do to get ready for this exam? I love this graphic I made. I share it all the time because it's really representative of how I learned on my second successful attempt at bar prep. I was doing a practice essay and missed an issue. I was like, yes, that's what it was. And then I never forgot the next time a similar fact pattern appeared. And you do this over and over. I also love this quote from Seneca because it completely reframes the whole process. Every answer that you get wrong on a practice test isn't some sign of weakness. Because if you're getting everything right, what are you doing? What is the point? Don't try to be ready before you're ready. That just leads to sloppiness and getting better at being sloppy. You'll end up going in the wrong direction. Instead, think of it as an opportunity. Strength comes from adversity. It's your chance to prove to yourself that you can figure it out, that you can fill that gap in your knowledge now before it actually counts on test day. And yes, of course, getting a question wrong does sting. Your heart is racing as you self-grade that question set, and your heart starts dropping into your stomach as you mark half the answers wrong. It's kind of embarrassing even when no one else sees it. But that feeling, that little sting of embarrassment, is an incredibly powerful teacher. You have to learn to lean into that discomfort because embarrassment is the best way I've found to learn a lesson. Pain benefits those who can learn. The more you lean into it, the more it sears the correct understanding and application of the rule into your body in a way that passively reading an outline ever will. If you're using my magic sheets or Apro sheets, yes, they're great for memorization, but you still have to use them as a learning tool in conjunction with practice and review. I've designed it to have a sensible structure. Some people report being able to visualize that structure in the flowcharts on test day. That's how much you have to use it in conjunction with practice. Okay, so we're ready to fail our way to success. We've tuned our mindset and maybe got in a little bit of a tough love, but you can't achieve anything extraordinary with ordinary means. Now let's continue building a smarter approach that disregards distractions and focuses your precious time and energy on the things that actually move the needle. Take a look at this. All right, so first let's talk about what not to do. This happens every year, but I just have to say it. Stop wasting time on predictions. I mean, look at this real example. A prediction that listed 11 subjects. That's almost every subject. Like, what the hell is this? What is what is even the point of that? There are many, many examples of people regretting listening to predictions. At least I've never heard of anyone being glad that they listened to predictions. I mean, okay, yes, go ahead and entertain yourself looking at all these different conflicting predictions when neurotic test takers come out of the woodworks asking about them. But trying to game the exam like this is just a distraction. So enough of the guessing games and the busy work that feels good, but is actually really empty calories. Let's stop all that noise. What can you do instead? Number one, you could focus your personal weak areas. In fact, if you see some predictions and panic because you see a subject that you hate, that is your sign to do more of that. That's your lowest hanging fruit. If I'm playing a piece on the piano, I'm not going to avoid the parts that are giving me trouble. Like, how well do you think that's going to go when it's time to play on stage? Number two, and we're getting into what I call the tripod approach. You could focus on the MBE subjects, first of all, because they show up on, the MBE, which accounts for half of your score and maybe half of your essays too. Hugely important. Number three, focus on the performance test because that's definitely part of your exam. If you're in California, it's going to be about 14-ish% of your score. If you're taking the UBE, you're gonna see two of them, 10% each, so a total of 20% of your score. Unfortunately, some people neglect the performance test because they think they can just they don't need to memorize for anything, and then they regret it because they could have passed with an extra point there. And if you're in California, professional responsibility is a huge one. It's practically guaranteed to come up, and it's an issue spotter, so you'd better know them. If you're taking the UBE, what are some high priority topics? Maybe secure transactions because it's a difficult subject. Or what about spending extra time on your weakest subjects again? Because instead of trying to read tea leaves and trying to predict subjects. So with these three areas, we're building a stable foundation on the highest yield areas instead of gambling. Why freak out over which essay topics are going to appear when you already have these areas locked down? That will get you over 70% of your score. It makes absolutely no sense to me. If you can stabilize these legs of the tripod, you can let everyone else whine and stress and panic. But remember, again, you need to put pen to paper and actually dive into these areas by solving past exam questions. That's where the learning, the memorization, and the retention happen. The past will guide your future. Now here's an approach a lot of people think is a waste of time. Redoing questions you've already answered. I know it sounds a little redundant, but I promise you will be shocked at how many questions you get wrong the second time you see them. People write down phone number for a reason. You are probably not going to get 100% correct if you were to redo the questions that you missed. So what makes you think you get it right on the exam? That's basically winging it. That's why there are people who complain about doing 3,000 questions, but they still don't get the score that they want. You want to reinforce the concepts you think you know. This process is what moves you from just being familiar with the material to mastering it. It's how you build intuition for how the examiners like to test certain ideas. So what does this all add up to? Well, it adds up to a fundamental shift in who's in charge of your preparation. It's not Barbary, it's not Themis, it's not your professor, it's not me. You have to stop being a passive participant in someone else's system and become the dean of your own studies. People who pass the bar consistently point to this idea as the foundation for their success. They're the ones who take ownership over their fate. They don't just blindly follow a prepackaged schedule that just, maybe won't work for them. If it doesn't work, they change it. If it works, they stick to it. In other words, they take control, they adjust as needed, and they trust themselves. So, this is your new mandate. Number one, trust yourself. You know what's working and what isn't. And if you don't, then experiment and see what works and what doesn't. Number two, do the activities that seem hard at first, but it's actually more motivating than sitting around letting awards go in one year and out the other. Prioritize active practice and learning over passive study. Number three, learn from every mistake and even every success. Why did you get it right? For the right reasons? For the wrong reasons? Why did you get it wrong? Practice is just a way to get feedback. It's valuable data points for the AI in your brain. And one last thing. Remember that I said advice is autobiography. Be intentional about whether how much of what we just discussed that you adopt for yourself. Does what I said make sense to you? If something doesn't, leave it. If it does, adopt it. Know why you're doing what you're doing with every moment of study. Above everything, I want to empower you with a framework for determining what's going to be right for you. But now I just want to leave you with this one question. They say that an expert is just someone who's made more mistakes than the rookie has even tried. Passing the bar exam is not about being perfect. Everyone fails to some degree. The people who pass are the ones who have failed the most in practice. They've made the mistakes, they've learned the lessons, and they've built their competence one brick at a time. In other words, passers just fail less over time. And that elusive sense of confidence that you're looking for, that actually comes from competence, not the other way around. If you remember the game Angry Birds, massively successful, it was created by a company that failed at its first 51 games that you've never heard of. So how many mistakes are you willing to make?